Hmm. So this is a Sufi.
So this is a Sufi.
Notwithstanding that, is there any truth to the impression that the Sufis were sort of more like the whirling dervishes, more into an inner jihad of trying to be more disciplined and all that?
Certainly, there are Sufis like Rumi, and there are Sufi poets, etc. But to me, that's a separate and almost historically trivial sort of reduction of the role of Sufis in the expansion of Islam and in Orthodox jihad war. We can take events out of today's headlines. Shamil Basayev, who we now know masterminded the Beslan massacre, is a Naqshbandi Sufi.
In which year are we talking?
Beslan, the recent Beslan massacre in Russia. I'm taking things out of the headlines.
Yes.
There was a Sufi jihadist brigade that was actually formed in Iraq. That was announced on an Islamist website that was participating apparently in homicide bombings. If we go back historically again, the time when Ghazali is writing is a period where we see a tremendous activity of jihad in Anatolia, what became Turkey. And we have dervishes proselytizing in these rabats, these sort of frontier monasteries, inciting the Turkic tribes to jihad. And this continued both with the Seljuk and then later with the Ottoman Turks. So they were incited to jihad. In India, we have a Sufi movement represented by, for example, as late as the 18th century, by Shah Wali Allah, who actually invited jihadists from Afghanistan to invade his home country of India because he felt that the Sharia was not being applied as in the kind of orthodox manner, in a manner more degrading to the Hindus, that he felt was appropriate. So
Sharia is the Islamic law.
Islamic law. So the whole movement in Chechnya historically, and don't get me wrong, the Chechen Muslims have had plenty of their own persecution. But the whole jihadist movement in Chechnya has always been both defensive and offensive, and very much inspired by Sufis. So Sufism is hardly an inoculum against jihadist war ideology. It embraces it.
So has this led you to understand the cause and effect of 9/11? Of the 19 suicide bombers?
Well, I mean, for me, it's hard to see 9/11 as anything other than an act of jihad terrorism. We can go back to throughout Muslim history the use of terrorism to disorient, to prepare the way for conquest of non-Muslim peoples. I think Bin Laden is very much an orthodox jihadist. You read his writings, he is indistinguishable from a whole line of historical jihadists. And the notion that innocent people, sitting in a building could be blown away is actually very consistent with the Islamic notion of what's called Dar al-Harb. And if I could
Sure.
indulge you in another excerpt, I think this is a really brilliant analysis by a great a Belgian scholar. His work also appearing here for the first time, except translated from French into English,
He's not an Islamic jurist or anything. He's just a scholar.
Armand Abel, who was actually given the privilege of writing in the Encyclopedia of Islam the entry on this whole concept of Dar al-Harb. But this is from a different body of his writings.
So Dar al-Harb.
Dar al-Harb being the abode of war,
Yes.
He was probably the greatest Belgian scholar of Islam, and did most of his productive work in the middle of the 20th century. But this is something that he wrote in 1958. Okay, so he says, together with the duty of the war in the way of God, or jihad, This universalistic aspiration would lead the Muslims to see the world as being divided fundamentally into two parts. On the one hand, there was that part of the world where Islam prevailed, where salvation had been announced, where the religion that ought to reign was practiced. This was the Dar al-Islam. On the other hand, there was the part which still awaited the establishment of the saving religion, and which constituted, by definition, the object of the holy war. This was the Dar al-Harb. The latter, in the view of the Muslim jurists, was not populated by people who had a natural right not to practice Islam, but rather by people destined to become Muslims, who through impiousness and rebellion refused to accept this great benefit, since they were destined sooner or later to be converted at the approach of the victorious armies of the Prophet's successor, or else killed for their rebelliousness. They were the rebel subjects of the Caliph. Their kings were nothing but odious tyrants, who by opposing the progress of the saving religion, together with their armies, were following a satanic inspiration and rising up against the designs of providence. And so no respite should be granted them, no truce. Perpetual war should be their lot, waged in the course of the winter and summer gazu, the razzias, the raids. If the sovereign of the country, thus attacked, desired peace, it was possible for him, just like for any other tributary or community, to pay the tribute for himself and for his subjects. Thus the Byzantine Empress Irene, who died in 803, purchased peace at the price of her humiliation, according to the formula stated in the Dhimma contract.
Wow. I want you to come back because this interview really has just begun. And what I played there in the background, which the people will hear momentarily, is some Jewish music from Tunisia, and I think you'll find it sounds very Arabic, and that's because there's about 1 million Jews that once upon a time lived in Arabic countries that for the most part do not live there any longer. Most of them are in Israel, United States, Canada. So once again, Andy Bostom, thank you very much for being here on Rabbi Rock and sharing your information and your wonderful book.
Thanks.
نمشحت أشريخة شي من يحار